thank you very much for joining us. It's a Tuesday. It's a Tuesday afternoon in Australia, or early evening, Victoria, New South Wales. What is the temperature? I have no idea. It's mild for this time of the year. Normally we have scorching temperatures right throughout the week, but it's pretty mild right now. But compared to the UK, we're having a heat wave. Not really, but it would be like a heat wave to them. Anything over in the UK, anything over 2 is regarded as extremely hot, to say the least. Dr. Matt Shelton is a founding member of New Zealand Doctors Speaking Out with Science, NZDSOS, which challenges government silence on COVID policy. That's especially the many dangers of the genetic injections. We talked today to Matt about an important research paper he co-authored that identifies the strange spaghetti-like structures observed by embalmers following the rollout of the COVID injections. Matt, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Mike. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Just making sure everything's working. Usually at the start, if it's going to break down, it'll break down at the start, but we have it working. Before we get into yours, I just want to play you this clip from Dr. Claire Craig, and we played it yesterday. No, actually, you know what? I will ignore that one. I want to go to Simone Gold. She's talking about clots, and I may play Claire later on, get your views on that. This is Dr. Simone Gold, and because we are talking about clots, if you can give me your opinion.
In their applications, in Moderna and Pfizer applications that they submitted to the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, they are classified, so the manufacturers classify them as genetic therapy. They create a little mRNA factory in your body. That mRNA factory produces spike protein. It definitely does not get shut off in some people, right? I don't know if 100% of people it's not getting shut off, or 2% of people it's not getting shut off, but definitely some percentage of people, that factory is going forever. There's people who took the shots 3 years ago who still have very high levels of spike protein. So the shot makes your body make spike protein. Spike proteins make clots. They do a lot of kind of bad things, but they make clots. And clots are typically the last thing that kills an organ or kills a person. So what is a stroke? A stroke is a clot to the blood vessels that go into your brain. A heart attack is a clot in the blood vessels that feed the heart. So you don't want to be building clots in your body.
So there's Dr. Simone Gold, and because we are talking about clots, I think they're called amyloid clots from COVID shots. Tell us your views on this, because scientific studies just published has for the first time characterised these structures commonly reported by embalmers worldwide as a strange rubbery white clot. And we were talking about in the days of TNT, and many people said that we were the clot for talking about it, but it is very true, isn't it?
Oh, they're absolutely real. And when you've seen and stretched these things for yourself, there's no doubt it's about as in your face as you can get. We're not talking about tiny lipid nanoparticles or contaminant plasmid DNA, which may be there in the billions of molecules in a single dose of an injection, but it's easy to dismiss those because they're so impossibly small, and a lot of the processes that we're saying go on, can be too complicated, and it's easy to sort of push them aside. But when you see these bizarre-looking rubbery sort of white structures, as many embalmers have, and a few clinicians too along the way, it's much harder to push them away and deny their existence.
So tell me this, the authorities, what's their, because, and I'm trying to think of his name, I've just asked Jen if she could just tell me his name. We used to have an embalmer on, or a funeral guy, and he used to do all sorts of things to dead bodies, all legal of course. He was saying then that there was that it was not normal. There were this stuff inside the deceased, and couldn't work out what it was. What's the authorities' reaction now to it? Have they pulled their head in, or are they still, as authorities do, the elite do, are they still digging their heels in?
Well, there's just silence, which seems
That's it. Silence.
all the different concerns.
We actually just dropped out then. Could you just repeat that if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. The response has been silence, which is a bit like what we've just experienced. So I don't know if you still got me. I'll keep talking anyway.
Yes, no.
There's been absolutely no acknowledgement at all. We wrote.
We've just lost him there. Hello, planet Earth. Let's go to this one here. It's incredible, isn't it? So I told you at the start, if it's going to break down, it will break down. And I'll just come back to I'm melting down. Come back to Matt. Are you there, Matt?
Yeah, I'm still here, Mike.
Yes, we need to pedal faster.
Yeah, well, the response was what we just had, which was absolutely silent from the authorities. It's not like we're arguing about statistics or debating data. These are real physical structures, and we wrote to all of the Australasian colleges, most of them based in Australia, actually, the year before last, I think, and said, look, what are these? And of course, we got silence, and we suggested that they needed to start doing their own science and come up with some answers. So we just went on and basically did it ourselves. So we've largely answered a lot of our own questions, and published last week on a preprint server a 3-part, the results of an investigation that's taken 2 years into exactly what these things seem to be made of, and from that we can start to postulate perhaps how they're formed. But as far as we know, it's the first sort of definitive structural analysis of what these things are.
What's the link between these clots and the COVID shot?
Well, that's the $20 trillion question, I'm guessing. I mean, what we set out to do in this study is to quantify what they are, and certainly we've shown that there's a very abnormal process that's triggered in response to it'll be a number of factors. We already know that because of the way that the cells that line the arteries largely are turned into production factories for this beast called the spike protein, those cells then become targeted for attack by the immune system. And in some cases, the holes in the cell membrane that form are very, very small. In other cases, they're larger. But essentially, something at an early point is distorting the body's natural inclination to form a clot to plug the hole. And then this whole process of a sort of polymeric, kind of uncontained, never-ending construction of these fibrous, very tough, elastic structures that essentially form a cast of the blood vessels in which they're propagating. And they can be very long. And we've all seen pictures, I hope, or probably of some of these things that are several feet long. And it's quite horrendous to think that these are growing in the body. But what we've been able to confirm, we think, pretty much absolutely, is that these things are not forming after death. There are some histological features which show that they are forming in conditions of laminar flow, of blood moving past in one direction. And by any analysis, these are not ever before recognized as forming with any other disease process. But then the body's never been subjected to a medical treatment like this, a genetic treatment that instructs the body to work in this particular way. So we think there is a link, but certainly the study we've just published in 3 parts on preprints.org is, at this stage, it's not about definitively proving why they happen. That comes next, and there's already been quite a lot of good work done around that whole thing anyway. I have my own private views, and many of us do, and I think they're well informed. And as a long-time medical doctor, although I have to say, of course, I'm not able to work at the moment, but I can certainly put my knowledge of medical science and more recently sort of research skills to try and investigate this problem, because we've got to do something about it. We've got to acknowledge that it's happening, and to pretend that this isn't happening in the face of numerous embalmers now answering surveys. We know how extensive these things are, and it started in 2021. And we all know something else that started, and it's just the height of foolishness to pretend that there might not be a link, and to try and dismiss it without even bothering to acknowledge it or come up with an alternative explanation.
What about the health on the patient? And I sort of, to have these clots, I suppose, when ugly things in your blood, stroke would be imminent, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be? It's going to happen. Because you need. Everyone's always concerned about your blood being thin enough so that it doesn't clot. If you are having these clots in it, surely stroke would be, or a heart attack, but probably stroke would be the major cause of death. And this is just from a person who's very interested in this sort of stuff.
Any sane, sensible person would look at these things and have to conclude that something catastrophic can happen. I guess the thing that surprised us is that many of the embalmers who have access to the medical histories of the patients who died and that they are now embalming, there weren't necessarily any clues that something was happening. And the formation of these things will take time, and they seem to be forming and settling in the middle of a blood vessel. So there's still blood flow possible around the sides. And we know in other pathologies in life with normal wear and tear of arteries that gradually get thicker, that the body can adjust. You can get what's called collateral circulation, so other blood vessels opening up around the blockage. But putting that together with all the concerns there've been about the rise in overall all-cause mortality, we're all hearing more and more and reading about befuddling cases of younger people who suddenly die, suddenly have strokes, who die in their sleep, or whatever. You can't stick your head in the sand and pretend that nothing is happening. And as long as no one else is trying to engage with the fact of this and produce an alternative explanation, then it is left to people like us to try and put the pieces of the jigsaw together and come up with an explanation that makes sense. And so from NZDSOS perspective, for instance, we feel like we've, for the last 4 years, had the playing field to ourselves. And that means that we may get some of our suppositions wrong, but nobody is coming in and showing why we're wrong about what we say, and what another explanation might be. So that in itself is probably the most suspicious and confirmatory factor that confirms that really bad things are happening, is the refusal of anybody to discuss this stuff with us or produce some sort of other hypothesis for what everybody is seeing.
It's very concerning because another report from Dr. Paul Marrick, he was reporting on a report that I think had a bunch of studies on those studies, and their own study also of 333 subjects, and that was done in South Korea. And it showed you that the number of cancers had risen, and there was, within 2 weeks of getting the shot, at times there was a cluster of cancers around of the entry point, which is really interesting. I don't understand why the medical authorities are still turning a blind eye to this information that's being released. If I wasn't so, I suppose, tempered, I would say there's a conspiracy going on. I mean, it's shock horror. Why would I ever think that? But surely, to goodness, when we had John O'Looney, he was the funeral guy and the embalmer from the UK, and he first brought it to our attention a couple of years ago. So it's not, people have been talking about it. You're providing the proof. Why aren't the authorities taking more note of this? Is there a conspiracy underway at the moment? Which we probably all would say yes. But surely to goodness you can keep hitting someone on the head and eventually you'll crack open the coconut.
Yeah, look, human nature is incredible in its ability to rationalize, to deny the bleeding obvious, to turn away, to be willfully blind. And I think, given how far this has gone, and how much was at stake for the reputations and the sort of social standing of all these decision makers at the beginning, it was probably almost inevitable that it was going to come this far, and it'll keep going this far until someone's able to stop it, or enough people are able to stop it. It's no longer a mystery to us. It's sad and tragic and frustrating, but it's no longer a surprise. And we certainly don't take it personally that no one's listening. They would probably say, well, this is the only option they have, is to pretend that it's not happening. They're the child who spilt the milk, and they just shut their eyes. And if they shut their eyes, it hasn't happened. And I think that's where a lot of these people are. Their backs are against the wall. In their heart of hearts, they know to some degree what's happening and what their part of it has been, and they're just ploughing on. Now, of course, probably, we can only deal and try and engage with the people in our own countries who are local to us. But the lockstep similarities that we've seen in all the other countries that have proceeded in exactly the same way, tells us that there's clearly been some sort of playbook, and time will tell. And I think time is telling, and there's a torrent of stuff coming out that is proving to people actually how sinister and malevolent some sectors of humanity are, and what they've been able to get away with. And we would see this as part of just the same sad old sorry sort of sex part of human history. And at some stage we have to engage with that and work out how we spot people who are destined to be these sort of players, predators. And I think we've talked about this before. But in the meantime, we continue to just try and work out as best we can what the truth is, and just put it out there. And at some point, enough people will have had enough, or will see that the systems, or at least the people running the systems, are rotten to the core, and that we have to do something about it.
Yeah, it's the main ingredient, one of the, not the main ingredient, but the main moral ingredient here, an ethical ingredient, ethics. Now, this is the video from Dr. Claire Craig, and we did it yesterday, and it's only a short one. I'd like to get your opinion on that. As for the authorities, we wish to say they'll all be held accountable. They're not going to be, and the ones that are the greatest, in my opinion, humble opinion at that, the people that are tasked with looking after our health and our well-being and our future, government and the medical fraternity. If you were in a boat with them and you had to, one of you had to jump overboard in shark-infested waters, I mean, I would probably choose the sharks. At least I'd feel safer, and that's how terrible they are. I'll play Claire's video. Get your opinion on this, because the ethics. I'll play this first. Jess, we're back again. She disappeared, but she was.
I've seen a little bit of it, Mike. I've seen a bit of it.
Okay,
I've seen a little bit.
Yeah, so she throws the hands up in the air, and she's very, very disappointed. What happened to ethics with the medical fraternity? I thought it was used to be regarded as lockstep, but no more.
That's probably the most, well, it was the earliest and the most sinister sign that we were in for a really rough ride, was the sudden dismantling of those ethical structures. and the the thinly disguised sort of pharmaceutical marketing that everybody was subjected to, and the deception and the deceit. So even if nothing bad had happened, and even if the things had gone smoothly, and we hadn't been lied to, the fact that we were browbeaten into going along with the narrative, not discussing potential downsides, not acknowledging that this was an experiment and there was no safety data, and having to listen to our leaders saying that this new injection was safe in all stages of pregnancy, and that pregnant women should line up and get it, and that we needn't discuss the downside, and that doctors who tried to would be persecuted and could expect hell on earth for their trouble. That on its own, needs. I think there's been criminality. We have basic rights, including the right to life and the right to not be coerced into medical experimentation, not to be subject to cruel and unusual treatment, not to be tortured. And that's actually what's happened. Many of those rights have been breached, and that then I think puts us into the area of criminal law. But from a medical ethics perspective, that was all we ever needed to have avoided everything that's happened. If we'd respected those, if we'd truly been able to get the consents from our patients, having given them the information on the unknowns and whatever negative information there was, and if we'd respected this golden rule that you never use anything in pregnancy unless it's absolutely necessary, and we knew before the rollout who the at-risk groups, if any, were from this COVID illness. So that remains probably the most glaring alarm signal that humanity is under attack. Is the dismantling and the moving aside of the entire medical profession of most of the world, it would seem to me.
The doctors, the medical ethics, the ethics, first of all, do no harm. I mean, that's been quoted by 1 billion people now. Must be driving you nuts to hear it, but it's very true. How do we get the medical profession? I mean, it's like saying, how do you bring a horse to water? You can't make it drink. You're providing all the information, you're providing data along with others throughout the world. And we have the medical fraternity that sort of turn their nose up at it and become a little more important than they are and say it's all rubbish and that the attacks on them were rubbish. And so the eroding trust in the medical fraternity it's like inverted commas climate change, which is not real, but the waves are bashing in against the sand, and the sand is disappearing. The sand being the ethics and the trust in the medical profession, and many, and you must drive you to despair also that many are going to the internet now to bypass going to the medical fraternity because they simply don't trust them. So how do we get back to the stage where the doctor didn't know everything, but the doctor did care about the patient and wasn't scared of being smacked and sent to the naughty corner or disbarred or whatever the case would be? How do we get back that trust, those ethics back into the medical profession?
It's actually very simple, and you have to go straight to the top. There are many doctors that are really unhappy about what's happened, to put it mildly, but they're scared, and they've kept quiet up to a point. So you have to deal with medical regulators. So that's would be the Medical Council in New Zealand, APRA and the Australian Medical Council, etc. Over the ditch with you, because that's where these edicts have come from, and that's where the enabling of these fundamental and seismic changes in the relationship between the doctor and the patient have come from. But the background, of course, is this sort of creeping sort of medical ethic Marxism, where the greater good has replaced what happens in the consultation room, privately between the doctor and the individual patient. And we've always said, look, if you protect that and you get that right in every case, then there's your common good, there's your public health benefits. But that's in the way often of this sort of socialist thinking, it's used as an excuse for a small group of people to gain considerable power. And there's the seduction of the idea of everybody having equivalent outcomes and it all being this sort of lovely utopia. But life doesn't work like that. And as soon as you remove that obligation that the doctor has always had to not just to serve the patients, but to protect them too, because you mentioned first do no harm, and it's never inappropriate to put that aside, because it means more than just be careful. It means that every single medical intervention, and mostly I'm talking about pharmaceuticals, in some way or other change the way the body works, so that they're the hope is that they do more good than harm, but they're interfering with body mechanisms, with biochemistry, and so you're always going to get a downside. So all medications are unavoidably unsafe by their very design, and that's also true of anything you inject directly into the bloodstream with an intention of changing something about how the immune system works. So all of this has been pushed aside under this sort of collectivist excuse that has come from the top. And we've learned a lot about the workings of our own medical council, for instance. And one of the problems we have is that the 4 lay members who are supposed to represent the public, but also be representative of the public, are all lawyers, and 3 or 4 of them are, they're heavy hitters. So our view is they were sort of brought in to kind of beef up the kind of the lawfare, not just against us, but probably against the doctor members of the medical council as well, because I just simply cannot believe that a council of 12 good doctors and true, if that's what it was, would have allowed all this to happen without political and kind of legal pressure being put on them as well. So I think that's where we need to go. We need to demand a shake-up, and preferably a removal of everybody who's had everything to do with any of the key decisions. And of course, they answer to the minister, and ultimately the Minister of Health is responsible for what goes on in the medical council. So it's not hard to identify, where the power is and where the pressure points ought to be. The issue is how we go about that.
I don't know whether I feel depressed or just depressed. I'll work that out later. Tonight I will not be drinking. It'll be suicidal. But I feel very depressed, and I am, about the whole kit and caboodle. It's I still read in Murdoch's newspapers, he's an anti-vaxxer or something. It's like, oh, here we go again. And they can't wait for the Nipah virus to get going. That's another story. A great chatting to you, Matt. If somebody wants to find out more about NZDSOS and yourself, how do they do that?
Well, our website, NZDSOS.com. And look, as depressing as all this is to hear, and I totally get it, Mike, knowledge is power. And the more people that start to understand the deception that's been visited on people, the better. And you can't unlearn what you've learned. And people are waking up.
I wish that a hurry up. The alarm has been going off for a couple of years. Dr. Matt Shelton, thank you very much for your time. This is The World Today.
Not the station for people who label truth as misinformation just because they don't like it.
For facts and truth.
Today's News Talk. The World Today.
And welcome back. It's not a bad afternoon now on the Gold Coast, which we're headquartered. It's a place where Lubra lips run free on the beach, and the intelligence has been washed out. Now, we have a few universities here. I was pulled up on that one. They said, you're a very bad person. I said, I am. So anyone going to heaven before me, please put in a good word. Won't do much good, but anyway. Robin Tilbrook is the leader and chairman of the English Democrats and chairman of the Workers of England Union. Welcoming again Robin to our microphone and camera. Robin, how are you?
Hello, mate. Nice to see you, and nice to be on.
Yes, lovely. How's the guns going?
Well, my antiques wouldn't do much good against the agenda that you had on just a moment ago.
No, I think
I did have an idea for Matt, actually, that he was complaining about the lawyers on his professional ethics body, and we've got that right across the Western world, I think. But these are lawyers who will talk on and on about so-called international law.
Mm.
And that is a bit of a litmus test. If a lawyer is talking about international law, they are almost certainly a Fabian or a Marxist. They're not somebody who's genuinely talking about a functioning legal system. They're talking about an ideology.
Starmer's a Fabian, isn't he?
Yes.
Yep.
He's leading too.
Let me read this from Wikipedia. And you don't have to believe it, by the way, because they're a very left organisation, but I look at it a lot. Yeah. The English Democrats are described by Wikipedia as a far-right English nationalist party. Are you the people that the PM hates the most?
Well, we certainly like to be.
Are you succeeding?
He definitely does hate any idea of English nationalism, yes. But he's not alone in that. When William Hague was the leader of the so-called Conservative Party here, he said that English nationalism was the worst kind of all nationalism. Labour were then talking about the English being the people who are likely to come out with being violent and disrupting society and so on. And of course, that's almost exactly the opposite of what's really going on. Very often, when you get politicians saying these type of things, they're projecting, aren't they? In the sense that they're the ones causing the trouble, and they're trying to make out that somebody else is.
Incredible. Tell me about how the English Democrats came about. Was it you were out hunting pheasant, you had a few nice whiskies, and you said, must do this? How did it come about? Or were you just outraged and you thought, time to put into motion not just words but some action?
When Tony Blair was campaigning and then got elected, one of the key things he was saying was that he wanted to change the then British political structure. And he wanted to do that by creating Scottish Parliament, Welsh Parliament, and also something similar in Northern Ireland. The Conservatives in that election had campaigned against that. They said that it was basically a threat to the UK. But he got elected, so he was proceeding with the agenda to create a Scottish Parliament, Welsh and Scottish governments. And I suppose at that time I simply thought, surely something like that should happen for England too, if they're going to have a Scottish Parliament and First Minister and government, then so should that happen for England. But what actually turned out to be the case is that both Labour and the Conservatives actually wanted to break England up into regions. These regions have no historic basis. They've got no social or cultural basis. There's really no sort of political support for it. In fact, on the one occasion when they've tried to get a 79% vote against. So it's a agenda of breaking up England, and I suppose where I've got to is if we're going to have either the UK or England broken up. But honestly, I'd rather have the UK broken up. I don't think the UK actually does very much for England, for the English, and it costs us an awful lot of money, and we get very little thanks for it. We get the bill and the blame.
What about the key principles of your party?
Yes, well, I mean, we are. Wikipedia's got it slightly right there. It's the Wikipedia entry for the English Democrats is written by a Welsh academic who's also a far left socialist, and he's very hostile to us. So it's certainly the case that he does us no favours there. But we are English nationalists, and a lot of our policies and ideas flow from that. So if we were talking about sustainable ideas, if we're using that term, we do want to keep England as green and pleasant a land as we can manage. We do want to control and reverse quite a lot of the mass immigration that we've had. We have not had governments looking after us or caring for us. We've had governments that are trying to undermine us and destroy the idea of England. In fact, one of the leaders of the establishment parties, Charles Kennedy, when he was leader of the Liberal Democrats, said he favoured regionalisation because regionalisation was calling into question the idea of England itself.
Incredible. Now, tell me, how do you achieve England's independence from the UK, and the rationale for this gets stronger day by day?
Well, our aim is to do it through democratic means and to win support for an independence referendum. But I think it's fair to say that the electoral system here in England is very difficult to make a breakthrough, and it also wildly disproportionately rewards certain levels of support. So, the Labour government, as it stands at the moment, has got what is described as a majority. The majority is only in the House of Commons, although they're engineering a majority in the House of Lords as well. But the fact is that it wasn't the majority of people that voted for them. Far from it. It was about 20% of the electorate that voted for them. And even that level of support has dropped dramatically since the election. So they're probably not supported by more than about 14% of the entire electorate. And yet we have a system which creates the sort of majority in the political system that allows the government to make major constitutional changes without any real check or balance.
What about other minor parties? If you wanted to push something through, could you call on their support, that they would support you? And I mean, I'm just thinking though, if you did what you would like to do, then you'd have to import whiskey, which would be a terrible thing. I'm not. You are a solicitor, so I would imagine you give it a bit of a nudge at times because you're a solicitor. That's what they do, and then you become a judge. You'll become an alcoholic before you know it. And then you have the Welsh. You'll have to pay to hear them sing. I mean, but to be serious though, are there other minor parties that could actually help you ramp this up a bit more?
Well, there are other parties that could.
Would they?
Part of the reason why the English Democrats have kept going now for, we launched in 2002. The reason why we kept going all this time is because there isn't actually any other party that's making a serious effort to campaign about the preservation of the English nation and of England.
Your policies, or the Democrats' policies, how different are they? Say for example, heritage. How different are they from them? I mean, this is a lesson here for me. I'm learning about English politics.
Yeah, so the Heritage Party was founded by David Curtin. David Curtin was a UKIP member of the London Assembly, and after UKIP basically, it didn't exactly break up, but it lost a lot of its electoral support, and got overshadowed by the Brexit Party. When that happened, he wanted to sort of carry on in politics, and he set up the Heritage Party. I should say that there is an overlap between the sort of policies that he would talk about and that we talk about. He hasn't got a focus on England or on what happens to England. His focus is on the UK and on maintenance of the Union. And the same is true of, say, Advance or for that matter, Reform.
Yeah, David used to work for us at TNT Radio for about a year, then had an election to go to, and that was it. When we were going to bring him back, but then the evil twins decided to cast their evilness over us, and that never happened. But David's a very good guy and a very good broadcaster too, very principled, and one of the best that I have worked with. So, David, if you're listening, still love you, mate. What about Reform? He's a good guy. I mean, and you're a good guy too. But and I respect you probably more because of the weaponry behind you. and especially on a Friday night, I wouldn't want to walk past the window. There goes an Aussie. There's God on Aussie. What about Reform UK? How's your party? What's the relationship? Is there a relationship with Nigel, the celebrity game show host in waiting, or is it? Are you just sort of just watching to see how things go?
Mike, I think I've got to pedal back just slightly here, because one of the things that people have to understand, if they're trying to understand the way party politics is going in the UK, is that Blair changed the entire basis on which political parties exist from a legal point of view, because political parties here are now regulated by something called the Electoral Commission. You have to get registered with them. The Electoral Commission have allowed political parties that are simply commercial companies to be registered. And Reform UK is a limited company. And that limited company is wholly owned by another limited company, of which the directors are Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef. So it isn't something where there's any sort of democratic political or power structure within the party. Whatever those two say is the policy for Reform UK Limited, that is the policy. So it isn't a situation where we could make an alliance with, say, a local part of the party. You know, if you were to go back before the Blair reforms or changes to the political system, the Conservative Party, for example, was basically a federation. It wasn't a unified structure. So you know, if you were dealing with the Conservative Party organisation in a local constituency, they decided who their candidate was, how they were going to proceed, what they were going to campaign on. They generally link that in with the central party. So, you know, I'm not saying there was a clash like that, but sometimes there was. So sometimes the central party wanted a particular candidate and the local party wanted their candidate, and the local party would always win.
Incredible. We're just sort of almost running out of time here. A couple of questions I'll try and get in. It's very expensive to run a political party, no matter whether you're in the US or whether you're in Australia, and no matter what size, it's still pretty expensive. How do minor parties attract the funding they need to make a difference?
You're absolutely right to ask that question, Mike. It is very difficult, and we've done our best. But of course, it is. I think the lack of access to any serious money has been one of the main reasons why we haven't been able to make more progress than we have. We've regarded our role as at least partly campaigning about English, England, the English nation's rights, and so on. We have stood in many elections. We've used the electoral system to get leaflets delivered, and we have distributed well over 50 million leaflets in our time. Sometimes we've done quite well in elections. We did win the mayoralty of Doncaster at one time, and we have had our successes. But I think our principal success, quite honestly, is that there are a lot of people out there who feel strongly about England and England's future, and we've seen this recently. There's been a big surge in people putting up flags across England, and the flag that you most often see is the flag of England, the Cross of St George.
Yeah, we in Australia over summer, which is still summer by the way. There's your somebody's phone's going off. I'll just there you are. It's one of our guests has decided there's a fire. Not really, but it sounds like a fire alarm. But anyway, but I was just saying before we run out of time, and this is just tongue in cheek and being an Aussie. We did enjoy the English flag in Australia over summer with the cricket. And it means a lot to us to see that flag now. But I have to say though, the English supporters that came out, sure they supported England, with the Barmy Army. There were 20 and 30,000 at a time. What they did though, they showed you that they do believe in England, not the UK, in England. And that, you would have watched a bit of the cricket. And you would have seen the Barmy Army going bazonkers, and they were very pro-England and very supportive of England. That would have made you feel quite good, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think you're right. We also had, not so long ago, a census in which what the state had done on the previous census was they'd asked whether people were identified as being English only, and that was high up on the list of options. And the result was that over 65% of people in England said they were English only, not British. And this time round, they buried that option right down at the bottom of the possible selection, almost at the bottom. And even so, more people said they were English only in response to that question than voted for Labour in the general election.
Very interesting.
Potentially, if we could galvanise that support into voting for an English party, and at the moment the English Democrats are that party, then we could be in government even under the current electoral system. But I do think that does require much more access to resource, basically.
And you would certainly make a point in Parliament with those muskets behind you, so nobody would disagree with you. Robert, if somebody wants to find out more about you and the English Democrats, because you are a regular here, and I should know this off by heart, but I always like the guest to be able to tell us.
Yes, thank you, Mike. So I'm on Twitter at Robin Tilbrook, and also the English Democrats are englishdemocrats.party.
Fantastic. Always a pleasure, Robin. We'll be talking to you again very soon, I would imagine. Robin Tilbrook there from the English Democrats.
We're today's News Talk, the world today.
And welcome back to the world today. Really enjoyed the protagonists, and I think Starmer is, and the government are just dreadful. And hopefully we can do something. how to destroy communities, bring in those 15-minute cities. Eric Kraus is a Russia expert, a French national, who has spent his entire career in finance in Moscow, and a magnificent city too, beginning in 1997 as head of fixed income for Dresdner Bank, and following the 1998 crisis as managing director of Uralsib Bank and then Sovlink Bank, where he authored the best-known Russian strategy publication, Truth and Beauty and Russian Finance. Now, we speak today about his expert views about recent developments in the Ukraine-Russia conflict and what Ukraine might look like and be governed when Russia wins the war, and Russia will win the war. Eric, thank you for joining me.
Good to be here. Thank you.
What's the latest in the situation with in the actual conflict at the moment with Ukraine?
It's a bit difficult to get day by day information on the ground. The nature of warfare has really changed with drones, and instead of massive waves of thousands of men moving across the landscape, you've got raids of 6, 8, 10 on motorbikes. The Ukraine's walls are gradually crumbling. And Russia is progressing towards a total clearing of the Donbass. It's taking a little longer. I had expected it would be over by about now, by the fourth quarter. And I think now for them to clear the rest of the land of Donbass, which is, in their words, currently occupied by Ukraine, by the Kiev regime, I think it's going to take some time until the next few months. But the outcome has been obvious.
We have a slight issue at the moment. Hopefully Eric will... No, he's just dropped out one of those days, but he'll come back. Here he is, he's back again. Eric, sorry about that. You just dropped out, but you're back again.
I hope so.
Yes, we can actually hear you. You have a very bad internet connection. I'm looking at it at the moment. It says 1 bar. So the Western media, it's just incredibly a bunch of lies as far as I'm concerned. They keep saying, we keep reading, I mean, even our national broadcaster in Australia says Russia is having huge losses and Ukraine is winning. Because that alone distorts what's really happening with Ukraine and Russia, because the rest of the world who believe legacy media think that Ukraine's doing a great job and we should stick with them and spend more money. And that's basically what it's all about, isn't it? Just to win the hearts of those that are very ignorant to the actual truth with Ukraine and Russia.
This is the first war in recorded history which has been fought mostly by PR agents. I mean, remember at the beginning of the war, Zelensky was doing Vogue photo shoots. It was a cross between Mick Jagger, Mother Teresa, and the Dalai Lama. And people believed it. I mean, the vast majority of mankind believes what they are told in the media. Obviously, there is much more skepticism now. But I mean, friends of mine who are reasonably well educated and intelligent, still, they read the Sunday Times, and the Sunday Times tells them that Ukraine is fighting for its freedom against those Russian invaders. There's no mention of the slaughter of Russian-speaking Ukrainians for 8 years before Russia finally did intervene, of the fascist roots of the Zelensky Kiev regime, of the Azov brigades, lionizing the great hero of Ukraine is Stepan Bandera, who was a Nazi. I mean, literally. So I've almost given up arguing at times. People will believe what they want to believe. This war is not going to be settled at the negotiating. This war is going to be settled by pretty much all wars before it on the battlefield. And at some point, the Ukraine will have to capitulate. And the question is when. And yes, by pumping money in, the EU is simply prolonging a conflict which it cannot win and which is going to cost it very dearly. And I think that is the most important thing that everyone is missing. The United States who caused all of this. I mean, it was Project Ukraine, it was Mrs. Nuland and the neocons who created the coup d'etat in Maidan. And now the Americans are waltzing away onto new adventures in Venezuela, in Iran, in Greenland. Who would have thought? And so they have other, they lose interest very quickly. They have short attention spans. And if you think of the fortunate Afghans, when the Americans pulled out, they left people starving. They left children dying of malnutrition. It wasn't their problem. They weren't going to pay reparations. Well, Europe doesn't have that option. Europe cannot afford to have a failed Ukrainian state armed to the teeth, bitter, angry, dangerous on its border. So they are going to have to come up with trillions of euros to rebuild.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean, I was there when Prigozhin was making a move on Putin, and the calls I got from family and friends saying, "You have to get out. You're in trouble. You're not going to come out of it alive." And the Russians around me were saying, "It'll blow over. It's all right." And that's exactly what happened. But I did have a couple of whiskeys just to get into the mood.
That's always helpful.
Yeah, it does. It was at a lovely hotel, Carlton was at. But and I go back to the ignorance part and the information operation that they're pumping out at the moment. At the end of the day, the truth always wins out. And how do you think the rest of the world will be when this is finished? Ukraine has flown the white flag in some particular way. Russia has stopped sending troops, and it gets back to a sort of peace. It's never going to be that for a long time, but at least you're going to have less killing and stuff. How will the rest of the world go when they realise that they've been told lies all along, that this was not about democracy, it was not about freedom, it was all about basically money and power and corruption?
They will invent narratives. The wonderful thing about being a journalist is never having to say, "I'm sorry." I'm not referring to you personally, but I'm referring to the mainstream. Do you really imagine that the FT is going to acknowledge defeat, failure, that they were misled? You will still meet Americans who will tell you that they won in Vietnam. They just decided to come home for a break. What I am hoping is that this will be the end of a certain number of political careers in Europe. The current establishment, Michel Macron in Paris, Merz and his colleagues in Germany, I do think they are going to come out somewhat discredited. And that is probably, and I don't know European politics as well as some others, but I think that is one of the reasons they're so desperate to keep this story going, because they cannot find a way to explain away the failure, but especially the massive drain of funds, which is going to follow. Ukraine has been demanding immediate admission to the EU, as if anyone could demand that. And the EU is saying no, because that means that basically the living standards of Ukrainians have to come up to the living standards of Europeans, which we're talking there about tens of trillions of dollars. Nobody has that kind of money. So even without that, even with any attempt to reconstitute the Ukraine, the industry has been destroyed, infrastructure has been destroyed, half the population is gone. And there are going to be an awful lot of widows and cripples and orphans, very unfortunately, left over from this adventure. Another neo-colonial adventure turned out badly. But this is not going to reflect well on the European political class. But I trust them to find some way to try to put lipstick on the pig.
That's an interesting thought. I'm just getting off track here a bit. I mean, the world has always used the Russians as the villains. Always the villains, you know, got gold teeth or whatever. You lived in Russia for such a long time.
Yeah.
That could not be further away from the truth than I've ever seen before. I mean, I found the Russian people, like people in all countries. There's good ones and there's bad ones, but generally they don't want to be killed. They don't want to kill. So why do we have this? And you'd think it would just disappear after a couple of decades, but it's still there. It's as strong as it was 10 years ago, and as strong as it was 20 years ago.
It's much stronger than it was 10 years ago. Yeah. The people need a villain. They have comic book minds. There are a lot of comic book minds out there, and they need a bad guy. They need a simple narrative, good and evil. The guys in the white hats and the guys in the black hats. And the Russians make, and the UK, it has been this way for 200 years. I mean, since the first Crimean War, we should call it, Russia has been demonized. And it's easy because it's Asiatic, it's foreign, nobody knows much about it. They speak this really difficult language. The streetcars are driven by bears. You can't, and there is a completely comical view. I mean, even when I lived there, I remember having some French friends who came for a weekend and for a short week and said to me, "Hey, I think we got on the wrong plane." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, we were expecting to see people shooting each other on all the street corners and, you know, having to duck out of the way." And it's a prosperous, modern city happening like Paris was in the 1980s. It's a very developed and a very modern place. Phenomenal cultural life, great theater, art, ballet, the world's best ballet. So there is simply the media have misled, and they've been told to mislead. And the FT is owned by the Japanese, and the Japanese has some issues. Nikkei has some issues with Russia. And the British establishment, Mr. Johnson, has built a political career out of hating Russia. And it has proved profitable. So, you know, they want to continue.
What have you heard on the latest with the peace talks? I think they're in, if I'm wrong, I think they're in Abu Dhabi, aren't they? On the 5th of February, Zelensky, Putin, and the US. How do you think this will go? I mean, and Putin just bombed a power station. Unfortunately, killed some people in trucks and whatever. But so he's not winding back his attack on Ukraine because he wants it finished. And why should he? But I'm just, you know, in a couple of days' time, we could have at least a ceasefire. I have a question though, just a bit of tongue in cheek here. After the last episode where Putin was invited to be at a particular place, and it was lucky he moved, do you think he'll go to this already preordained space he's supposed to go to, or will he send in a double just in case they bomb that one too?
Okay, well, I wasn't aware of the bombing, but what I can tell you is very for the last 6 months, for the simple reason that Russia has been very clear about its work.
And we just lost Eric for a moment. Now, Eric will come back. He just has a couple of connectivity issues there, talking about Ukraine and Russia. And Eric Krauss certainly knows what he's doing. Eric, we just dropped out. We'll come back to you. If you
Yes.
just wind back to the start.
I'm sorry. I'll get a different internet connection next time. Very sorry. I thought I'm on Starlink. Must be Musk who's interfering with us. I've been as I was saying, I've been very skeptical about the peace talks for the simple reason that Zelensky is not a president, he is an actor. He was put in place. He forgot that he is only an actor. He is not the director, he's not the cinematographer, he's not the scenarist. So, but he's fallen in love with his role. And the Europeans are encouraging this delusion. And Russia is not going to compromise. Russia is the winning party in this war, and it is the winning party which sets the terms of peace. Think Germany in 1945. To imagine that Putin is going to now compromise is simply foolish. They've laid out their terms. The terms have got to be accepted pretty much as is. Some of the details can be negotiated. Trump is trying to settle it, but he seems to change his mind like he changes his shirts. So I don't put a lot of faith in that. I really think that this war, I could be wrong. We could get a peace settlement. I hope so. There are too many dead people running around. But I would be very happy if there was, but I would be very surprised. I think until Russia actually militarily clears the Donbass and starts to threaten Odessa, the other side has no reason at this point to capitulate. What do they have to lose? A few more dead Ukrainians? Well, that didn't bother them until now.
We'll fast forward here. Imagine that we have a ceasefire, then we have a peace deal, then we're looking at elections within Ukraine. Personally, I'm not very hopeful of any positive outcome to come out of those, the ceasefire or the peace deal with an election process. History says that Ukraine it's been corrupt since Adam was a boy. How do we get around the oligarchs and how do we get around the inherent and ensconced corruption that is part and parcel of the entire process of government in Ukraine?
You don't. I mean, I lived there briefly, and I did a lot of business with Ukraine when I was living in Russia. It was even in finance, even in bond finance, there was a great deal of corruption. And the funny thing is, I know a lot of Westerners who made a great deal of money in Russia. I don't know anyone who made any money in Ukraine. They won't let you take it. The system. What I think is going to happen is the war will end. The Ukraine is going to be largely devastated. There's going to be a lot of bitterness, and it will initially be directed towards Russia. But I think very quickly, people will begin to realize how badly they were played, and that all the promises made by the West don't come true. They're not going to become members of the EU. Mr. Trump is not going to make them the 56th or 57th state. I don't know how many new ones he's created, but there is going to be a lot of bitterness and disappointment. And I think that Europe is going to have to deal with this. Now, on the other hand, yes, there has been a lot of ethnic hatred created, which 20 years ago didn't exist. There was sort of a joking like between the English and the Scots, a bit of some joking, we'd needle each other. But there was no hatred. Everyone spoke Russian in Kiev. No one spoke Ukrainian, maybe at home or with a grandmother. But it was part of the same country until '89. Ukrainians went to university in Moscow. Russians went to work in Kiev. There was a lot of intermarriage. Everyone has Ukrainian friends. So this hatred has been created. It has really very little historical root except in the far west of the country, Galicia, which is really Poland. It's not Ukraine, though they would debate that. So there is going to be a very messy situation. And the longer the Europeans push for this war to continue, the easier it's going to be for the Russian side, because the Ukraine is not going to pose much of a threat to anyone for years to come, because it is going to be so badly damaged. The notion that they could then, raise a 300,000 man army and invade Russia is so far out there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. If there was this peace deal, what would happen to the, for example, the SBU? There are secret police.
I'm sure they'll manage to keep their jobs.
It'll become secret.
I wouldn't worry about them. They will repackage themselves. I do not know who would win a free and fair election, but I don't think it's a very valid, very relevant question, because there isn't going to be one.
No.
One would assume that there will be a setup whereby Zelensky or his chosen successor, somebody loyal to the Washington, Brussels axis, is going to be elected. I would not expect a neutral or a pro-Russian character to win, especially because the most pro-Russian areas of Ukraine are now part of Russia. They are, the Donbass, Luhansk, etc., are now Russian, and therefore will not be allowed to vote. And the interesting thing is, you've got millions and millions of Ukrainians living in Russia. Are they going to be allowed to vote? If so, then you're going to get a very pro-Russian candidate. But I think they will find a way to avoid that. I mean, look at the situation with Romania, where it's mostly the Romanians abroad who voted for the pro-NATO candidate. Well, in Russia, of course, the Ukrainians would be voting Russian, because they are Russian, because they speak Russian, because ethnicity is Russian, because their culture is Russian. And Ukraine has got a folklore, but it is not their identity.
Yeah, just thinking, I would imagine one of the, and actually it's never going to happen, there's another stupid question, but I'll ask it anyway. If there is a peace deal, what do you do with the Nazis? You can't get rid of them. It's part and parcel of it. So how do we control that?
Mr. Putin frequently talks about denazification, and I don't think that is an attainable goal. You are not going to be able to purge you're not going to have a Nuremberg trial. It's not going to happen. So at best, there is going to be, I also think there may be a split up of the rump Ukraine. Remember, there are various countries with various territorial claims, and it's all sort of holding together right now because it's wartime. But when the shooting stops and the damage has to be repaired, then there are going to be parts which are pulling apart. They could have avoided this entire nightmare situation by creating the Ukrainian Federation, analogous to the Russian Federation or the Swiss Federation, where you had different areas with different ethnic identities, but common foreign policy, common economic, currency, etc. So a mixture, a federal system could have worked. Well, now it strikes me as very difficult. And Mr. Putin is demanding ethnic and linguistic and religious rights for the Ukrainians of whatever ethnicity. But I would be surprised if they actually allow this. There is a fierce nationalism, what you refer to as the Nazis, and they do have fascist roots. But what they are is hyper-nationalist. They don't want anyone speaking anything but Ukrainian. They don't want anybody wearing anything but traditional Ukrainian dress. There is this absolute nightmare which caused all of the disasters of the 19th and 20th centuries, which is extreme nationalism and the hatred for one's neighbors of different ethnicities. So I'm afraid the Nazis are going to be with us for a while. That's my guess.
What about the frozen assets? If they we get to this stage, will Europe be able to keep them, or does it go back to its rightful owner?
Everybody seems to forget that Russia has frozen rather more in private European and American assets than the Europeans managed to grab of Russian assets. Now, the owners of these assets are going to be demanding or asking or begging or pleading that their governments find some way to get them, their planes, their factories, their trademarks, their land back. And Russia is only going to do so in a pari passu manner. You give us back ours, we'll give you back yours. How this can be done, because we're talking about public assets. Frozen Russian assets are overwhelmingly public versus private assets. And I don't know any juridical history. I don't know any story of such a swap being performed, but somebody's going to have to figure it out. Russia is not going to walk away from these assets without grabbing its own pound of flesh.
Finally, and again, appreciate your time very much. This is a very
Certainly.
enthralling conversation. How do you see the lay of the land? Will it go the way, actually, it's going different directions. Everyone's got a theory. You probably have a very good idea on the lay of the land and where this will head to. Where do you see Ukraine, Russia, and the combined two entities? Where do you see them being in the next, would you say, a year's time?
As I said, in a year's time, it's going to be extremely messy. That's going to be the first phase of the post-war, when there's going to be a lot of wound licking and attempts at reconstruction and a growing disappointment in the Kiev regime that the Westerners have not come up. I mean, already you see Zelensky demanding this and demanding that, and just wait till the shooting is over. And he's going to be expecting trillions, and they're not coming. Nobody has that kind of money anymore. So I think it's going to get worse before it gets better from the that's the background, the music standpoint, and then gradually people are going to have to work. And look at Georgia. I mean, Georgia was fiercely anti-Russian for a few years. Now they're back in the Russian orbit quite happily. They have realized that Russia is their major neighbor, is the most important investor, that they have a lot of shared history. And the Russians aren't so bad after all. I mean, the Europeans are worse. So I would hope, and this is a hope, it's not a prediction, that gradually there will be an entente, there will be an understanding that the Ukrainians were badly played by the West, and they want back home. Russia is their major neighbor. It's the major supply of energy. It's the major supply of resources. It's the major supplier of capital. They all speak Russian. And it's going to look to them a lot more attractive than perhaps Germany or Sweden.
Eric, this has been fascinating, and would like to do more in the next few weeks, if you wouldn't mind. I was just seeing that you're in Hong Kong. You're wearing short sleeve shirt.
Absolutely.
But you couldn't do that in Russia at the moment.
Probably. I'm pretty good with the cold, but I mean, here I'm only wearing a button-down shirt because I'm on the tube.
But you're in a magnificent city. You're in a magnificent city at the moment, and enjoy the warmth. Eric, if somebody wants to find out more about you, do you do socials and stuff like that?
Oh God, yeah. I think I'm on Facebook. I don't do Twitter. I used to be very public. I'm a little less so now because of business reasons. But you can find me on Facebook, or you can email me at krausmoscow@yahoo.com.
Fantastic.
Anything
Eric,
interesting, I'll answer. Anything
Eric,
silly, I won't bother.
It's and people should, if they get a chance, go to Moscow. It is not dangerous.
Amazing city.
It is not
It's a
magnificent city. I took my phone with me, and I was just walking through the Red Square and streaming back to my wife, and she was shocked. She thought I would have been thrown in handcuffs and dragged off to the
yeah,
front line
yeah.
or something.
We get this a lot. No, it's you can walk home. Your wife can walk home safely at 3 o'clock in the morning, any place in Moscow, and you don't even think about it. You don't worry about it. You can take the metro anytime. It's absolutely safe. It's clean. It's fast. Try that in London.
You can.
Or
But
Paris.
the worst thing about Moscow is the traffic. It's dreadful. Yeah.
The weather ain't so great either, mate. But we live with it.
A good
We
whiskey.
live with it.
Eric, thank you very much. Eric Krause, thank you so much for your time. This is The World Today.